welcome. Today we have George Kansas in the studio, results coach, owner of Leadership Motivation, attorney, and single dad all on top of it. How are you doing, George?
I'm good, thanks, Janice. How are you?
Good.
Actually, I'm fantastic. Thanks for asking.
Well, after the talk that you just gave, I was so excited to be part of the audience. George was speaking today to about 250 people, giving them motivation, giving them direction, aiding them, all of us. I was part of the audience, aiding us in setting our goals, deciding what our purpose was. But I think most of all, how are we going to get there? That was like big.
That was one of the takeaways for you, huh?
Yeah.
Well, that's good. I mean, the Power of Purpose is the name of the program, and that's really what I want to do. I want to help people strike a balance between those professional objectives that they've identified as really important to them, but historically always seem to come at the cost of all those important personal objectives. And although I really believe it's impossible to have everything we want, but it is possible to have anything we want. And if I can help people understand the difference between that, and then really set about establishing the priorities so that they can balance those and really strike that balance between those personal objectives that are really important to us, the roles that we play as parents and as friends and as family members, and also address the important things that are those sort of material things that are important, you know, establishing a career, and also having that feed back into the personal part of it, you know, deciding on a career that will enhance those personal objectives, you know, our purpose, like we talked about.
Well, you brought up so many good points that I think really aided my own decisions and how I'm going to set forth my goals.
Wow.
But I think the one thing that really hit me, overwhelmed me really, was how you stood up there. First of all, just stood up there in front of the crowd. I mean, you really put yourself out there. You developed a PowerPoint presentation as well as the speech that, you know, all tied together. Your opening is fantastic. And just all the many elements that you had to put together to create it was really phenomenal. I mean, I was like, oh my God, I could just see all the hours spent painstakingly making decisions on how to give a great presentation. But I think the really main thing that just overwhelmed me was how'd you stand up there and share your pain? That's what I personally find so difficult, is standing in front of people and sharing about your mother's death. You spoke about that and how it affected you. You spoke about your divorce, raising children on your own, thoughts and feelings about your father and how you compared to him as a child. How would you compare to him when you became an adult? In front of so many people, and now it's sort of like your guts are open.
Yeah.
It's out there, and now they can judge you. They can have feelings about you. So how do you handle that?
Well, wow, it's like 10 different answers in there. Let me see if I can take these one at a time. First of all, you know, there's a great quote. There's a Pegeen is her first name. She's a fellow faculty member of mine at thecoachingstaff.com, and she said this to me one time, and it just stuck in my head. She said, "What you think of me is none of my business." So just that part, to address that judgment part, you know, my story is my story. What's happened to me and how that's shaped me is the way it is. And, you know, what someone thinks of that, positive or negative, is going to be up to them. And whether it shapes them or not, or enables them to help to craft their future, that's going to be up to them. And so it's just, but it's my job, my purpose to put it out there. And so as far as the judging thing, I guess I got over, I mean, people's feedback is really important to me. At the same time, I guess I've heard enough negative feedback to have learned to sort of, okay, acknowledge it for what it is, take what I need out of it, and sort of file the rest away. So the judgment part of it doesn't freak me out as much as it used to. You know, when I gave my first speech at the Voorheesville Public Library, and there were 12 people, I call those people the Dirty Dozen, you know, the original people who subjected themselves to my ideas. And, you know, when I first read their feedback, I remember thinking, oh, God, please just make this one be a positive one, and then read that and say, okay, that was from my best friend from law school, so I know that one's going to be good. And then I was like, oh, this is from, you know, my friend, this is from another friend, okay, that's going to be good. And then reading the strangers ones and thinking, oh, just please help them be constructive. And, you know, if you look at it the right way, they're all going to be constructive. Even the really nasty ones, everybody's going to have a bad day or whatever and give you some nasty comments. It doesn't bother me anymore.
Well, that's one thing. You do put out the evaluations so that everyone in the audience does have the opportunity to tell you the positive things that they've gotten out of it or the negative things.
Well, I think the negative things are just as important in a way. I mean, I don't want to focus on that so much, but I do look for that because, you know, you heard me say, if you want to grow, which is what I want to do, I want to constantly improve myself. You know, life is full of paradoxes. I think one of the biggest paradoxes that I talk about almost all the time is the paradox that we must accept ourselves for who we are. At the same time, we must always strive to improve ourselves. It's a paradox. You know, an oxymoron is two ideas that can't coexist. A paradox is two conflicting ideas that must coexist. And so I think that's really the paradox that I sort of wake up to every day is, you know, I have to accept myself for who I am, but at the same time I have to constantly strive to improve myself. And you heard me say, in order to improve ourselves, in order to really reach for that, we need to be able to invest three things. You remember I said we have to invest our time, we have to invest our money, and most importantly, we have to invest our pain. And acknowledging those weaknesses in the presentation, and acknowledging the times, you know, where I forget what I'm supposed to be talking about, or when the audio doesn't work, when you saw we had the problem with the computer wasn't driving the audio properly. That happens. Mr. Murphy crawls in there and messes things up when we don't expect it. And so I have to be willing to invest that pain if I'm going to improve my craft, you know.
Well, what motivates you when you get up in the morning? I mean, here you're going to go out and emit all this energy, because you really do. I mean, in person, on stage, on television, you just really emit all this really positive energy.
You're making me blush.
And it's, how do you, I mean, when you get up in the morning, something has to motivate you so that you have that energy to give to myself, who you've coached, to many other people you've done results coaching with through the years. And when you speak to large groups of people, is it exercise, food? What do you do? Psyching yourself up?
Well, there is a difference. When I wake up and I have a big gig like the one you were at, the 250 people, it's not huge, not the biggest group, but it was a good-sized group, and you know where there's going to be a lot of interaction, and where I know I really have to be at the top of my game. You know, if I can't be out there in front of an audience like that and you know, be drowsy, you know, because they you know, they pay at the door, they want to be, you know, part of what I understand is that in a way it's sort of part of the entertainment thing too. You know, they're not, you know, you heard me joke about when I was a kid I couldn't decide whether I wanted to be a game show host or a rock star, and so part of it is sort of my desire to be out there and you know, put myself out there, and entertain people. I get a kick out of people laughing at my jokes and people coming up to me after the presentation and saying, oh man, that one, you were talking directly to me. You know, because there are a lot of parents out there, you know, in any audience there's going to be 60%, 50%, 75% parents, and some audiences, depending of course on the group, more. And so they can relate to that. Some of them have been divorced, so they can relate to that. Some of them have had businesses that have failed, like I have, and so they can relate to that. Some of them have had painful losses in their lives, so they can relate to that. I mean, everybody, I try to put a lot of messages out there that I've experienced, because hopefully out of the messages I put out, someone will be able to relate to enough of them to really make a difference.
That's true. So actually, by you sharing your painful stories or things that happen to you, painful events, maybe it can bring you closer.
Well,
Maybe really reaches out to that particular audience member and actually brings them in closer and allows them to really listen to what you have to say.
well, I hope so. I mean, I guess if I sort of broke it down from a psychology point of view, that might be a strategy. I guess I never really thought of it. Maybe
I didn't either until just now.
But the object is I've got a message that I feel I was born to share with people. The idea that confident, self-actualized people live their lives by their own design as measured against their own standards. You heard me say that many times. And in order to do that, we got to have goals. We have to know our purpose, and each of those goals has to be consistent with that purpose, a driving purpose. And we have to know in our bones that we're meant to fulfill those goals and purposes. And I think I only have a limited time to do that. I got to get out there and share that idea with as many people as possible and help people know in their bones that what they were born to do. Because I feel really blessed, really fortunate to have discovered, stumbled upon, remembered that at an early age. I was only really 30, 33 when I figured that out, 30, and I feel really, really fortunate that that's the case. And some of these people, I work with college kids, they're 21 years old, try to get them to sort of start looking, because they're not really going to find it at 21. But if they start looking, maybe they'll find it a little sooner. And man, wouldn't that be awesome? If you found it when you were 25 and you could just, just start going then. And a lot of people in my audience is 45, 50, 55, 60, 65. It's like, I've been doing this for 25 years and it's really not me. And I've always known it, but I never had that impetus, that little bit of energy. If I can give somebody that little bit of whatever to say, you know what, not that I need to change my whole life, maybe if I just change this one little thing, can make such a huge difference. If I can do that, man,
in the breakout session where you got into actual particulars and actually kind of more what I would call like hands-on workshop, kind of like doing your homework.
That was fun. I had a lot of fun.
It was great. I was seated next to a gentleman who was really facing his second career, the second half of his life. And you brought up the question of what are your blocks? And you had all this write down and think about our bottlenecks. And so he was sharing with me later how he's really facing the second half of his life. The first chapter is finished and with his career, and I think more commonly with men, that's a huge, huge change and can really be a huge upset. I know, for many people, well, for anyone, to have to face a whole nother career in their 40s and making the decision of like, what am I going to do now? And I've run into different friends of mine that are facing major career changes. They're completely leaving, and actually they're women, so I guess it's either way.
I think that it crosses gender all over the place. I mean,
to just make that whole career change, and then I'm giving them tips that you shared at this, talk. I said, oh, well, here's some of your homework, George Kansas said, write
awesome.
down your, what would you do if you had 30 years to do something that you want to do, and then I think it was 3 years and then 3 months.
90 days, yeah.
And then also about the bottlenecks. And I think those were like key things that I've been able to pass on to others and looked at for myself too. Like, well, what are my bottlenecks, like what's standing in my way? And I think, you do. You reach out to all different ages. And if they're in their teens or college age, they're looking at many years of what am I going to do and how am I going to motivate myself. And then people in the middle stage of their life too, looking at career changes.
Well, it's amazing. The message may be a little different, but the ideas are really, anybody can use these ideas. I met with a group of high school students a couple of weeks ago, and I was blown away by the fact that they're really super intelligent people, had phenomenal ideas, but they were acknowledging to me basically that, the goals, the idea of goals and a understanding their purpose was really irrelevant to them at that stage. And I totally recognized that and acknowledged that. It was so cool that they shared that with me. But they recognized that the idea of the confidence that comes from having a sense of purpose and the sort of self-certainty that you've heard me talk about so much, that people really have to have a sense of in order to consider themselves successful, to go after the things that they really feel ought to be done. Whether, and it's more important now than ever when we're talking about all this stuff that's going on in our country, where people feel that there are good things going on, people feel that there are not so good things going on. And I tell my kids all the time, you know that famous quote, evil flourishes while good men do nothing? You ever hear that expression? And not to make a big deal about evil, because, you know, that's like a crazy thing now. But the idea is if you see something that you don't think is right, then you ought to do something about it. Even if it's write a letter, make a phone call, talk to a friend about it, anything to get the dialogue going. You know, that's the thing we gotta, you know, we just can't stop. The dialogue must go on, and we've got to keep stimulating it any way we can. And so talking with these kids about goal setting and all that, it was like, well, that's not so important to us. But what you've told us in the past 40 minutes about self-confidence and how we can learn to sort of trust our gut, that's really valuable to them.
Good.
So, you know, slightly different message, but really the same ideas that can help anybody.
Yeah, because I can see where different parts of your program would hit different types of people. You know, where I'm more affected by maybe A, B, and C parts, and someone else takes away D, E, and F more, because maybe that's like where they're coming from.
Well, it depends on where they are in their life, too. You know, people, I did a telephone conference call with business people from all over the country, members of this particular organization, client organization. Called in, and I facilitated the conference call and basically gave them a crunch down 20-minute telephone version of the hour speech that you participated in, and really was whipping through this. I was just rattling through this presentation, just trying to get the really high points and offering, you know, if you have any more questions, send me an email, gpk@georgebuchanan.com, and I'll fire you back an answer, you know. And this one woman from, I think she was from California, I don't remember where this area code was from, but she emailed me back and she was like, you were talking to me.
Wow.
You were totally talking to me. You know, she said it like 3 times. She's saying how I'm a single parent, I was married for 25 years, my husband left me, and this is the place in my life I'm at, and I've been a single parent now for 2 years, and I really heard what you said about committing to my priorities and not letting other people decide my priorities for me. And this is a pretty successful person to begin with, feeling that just this little piece of information, what I thought was a little piece of information, was really enhancing her ability to continue her success and be a better parent and enhance her career. Wow, you know? That was awesome. If I can do that in a 20-minute phone call, that makes me feel great. You know, that's what gets me out of bed in the morning.
Okay. So what motivates you, or one of the things, is then when other people give you that feedback after they hear something that you've said, and they say, oh, George, you know, that really changed where I was headed.
Oh, yeah. I'm a feedback junkie. You know, the more, the better. That's why I say even the negative stuff, as long as it helps me, as long as it gives me an idea that helps me craft the show better, you know, the presentation better, then it's valuable. You know, there was some criticism about the computer, for instance. It wasn't working right. Right at the end there. It was working great up until the end.
I know, after all that time.
But it raises the question, okay, what next time can we do to avoid that? It's valuable information. And you know, you say, what motivates me to get out? Well, the first thing that motivates me to get out of bed is, you know, making sure my kids get their lunch made. That's the first thing. Breakfast and getting the lunches packed up.
I know, that's what always got me up in the morning.
That's the first thing.
Mommy!
That's the first thing. That's it. That's it. What do we have for breakfast, Dad? That's the first thing that motivates me. But then after that, then it's, you know, maybe having an opportunity to help some people.
Yeah, that's great. I know just for myself and more results coaching that you've done for me is a few things that I think someone could take as a little tiny thing But you offered it out to me, and it really changed the presentation that I was doing. One was just saying, take a breath.
Yeah.
And I think that's, well, you know, that's huge. It was for me. You know, it changed how I gave my presentation. And there are a lot of other things in the motivational thing. I think the bottleneck thing was really important. I think a lot of times people don't really seek out what their bottleneck is, what their block is. Why am I really holding myself back, or what's really going on?
Well, what happens when you look at a bottleneck? You experience pain, right? Nobody who wants to volunteer for that, right? But like I said, you got to be willing to invest in your pain. It's probably, you know, not to sound like a masochist, but it's probably one of the most valuable resources you have. It's, if you look at, you know, I tell this story when this sort of comes up. I try to tell this story, and here in upstate New York, we have sort of an opportunity to understand this. The pine barrens, you know, the pine bush here, and down in Long Island, they have big pine barrens. And there's a particular tree called the pitch pine that grows in the pine barrens. The pitch pine only grows, obviously, from a pitch pine cone, but the pitch pine cone won't release its seeds for, a pitch pine cone could sit on the ground for 20 years and never grow into a pine tree until there's a fire that destroys everything. But that fire, that intense heat, thousands of degrees, will cause that pitch pine to open up, or pine cone to open up and drop its seeds into the ground, and then pitch pines grow from that. And like the pitch pine, we can't grow without that pain. If we don't, experience that pain, you know, so what I call those sort of universal aha moments, you know, when the universe turns a light bulb on over your head, and you think, oh yeah, you know, like you heard me tell the story about my mom and how when she said to me not to put anything off, when, you know, here she was, you know, suffering from cancer, and it created such phenomenal perspective for me. It just brought it right up. You were in film. What is the name of the effect where if I'm zooming in on your your face, and then by whatever trick of the lens, I bring the background right up into focus? What's that called? There's got to be a name for that, right?
You mean where you're changing the depth of field?
Right, where all of a sudden, if I'm just zooming in on you, and then the background is all blurry, and then all of a sudden they do something, and the background comes into focus, and it makes it look like they drag the thing. Well, that's sort of what happened that day. Was like wham! All of a sudden, I got perspective.
Wow.
You know, and if I can share that perspective with people, that's what. I'd love to do that with audiences. I do that with small groups and companies all the time. And because when you're working on a project, say you have 10 executives working on a really big project, the pressure's really on professionally, and they're thinking, oh my gosh, we've got to make results, we've got to create results in this particular scenario. So they're really focused on the problem, the task at hand, and they forget the fact that they have all this universal resources at their disposal to help solve this problem. But because they're so focused on that, well, you know, I feel like Mighty Mouse. Here I come to save the day. You know, I come in here with, okay, perspective. This is how you might see it if you could think a little differently. And I do something to jar them. And I have products that I've developed to help them do that. And because it's all about perspective.
That's great. Because I know there was one lady in the audience that, if it were me, I'd have such a hard time knowing how to help her get through this hurdle. She was stuck really in her problem of too many work hours and not being able to really go toward what she really wanted to do.
Oh, she was great.
And yeah, I almost want to just get up and say, look, you know, maybe on the weekends or take a sabbatical or whatever. And I think you really brought it around. You really, to me, that was such a challenging moment. And I think it's those difficult moments that when you get through them, then you know that's success. I mean, it's great to be like on the easy road and everyone understands what you're saying. But she was so locked in to not hearing what you were saying.
See, and I was like, part of me, there was a little voice on my shoulder saying, tell her to come up to you after the group.
Okay.
You know? But I thought, if I don't, you know, lead her through this with everybody here, I'm missing a huge opportunity to show what we can all gain from this. And she was all focused on, you know, I want to write this book, but I work too much.
Yes.
And I wanted to lead her, because I knew that if she really wanted to write that book, if that was her most important thing, then she'd make it possible to write that
I
book.
believe so
But I had to
also.
have her get to that, come to that
Yeah.
conclusion. And she, if you remember, right at the end, she said, maybe I don't write that book this year. Maybe I write it next year. And it's not about putting it off, but it's about saying, okay, maybe that's true. Maybe it's also true that maybe you do write it this year. But if you do write it this year, you've got to make the tough choices that are going to make that possible. And a lot of times people don't want to make those tough choices. And
I thought that you...
that's paradox. Remember, life is
Okay.
pain. You know, you got these tough choices. Well,
Because I could just see you bringing her around to looking, it was hard, it was difficult because she was not going
She
to
was-
be receptive.
right.
Yeah, she was holding
no, you don't
dead
understand.
strong to
I'm
where
working
she
too many
was.
hours, right?
And I think as suggestions started to come out, and as you did continue to work with her, it did start to sort of bring it in another direction. And I just think seeing that your positive results of your coaching right there and the motivational talk, because I got to hear other audience participators,
Yeah,
which
you
was
had-
really great.
I would have loved to have heard that.
Oh, it was really great, because in the past I've heard George in the studio and with maybe, you know, one or two people in his motivational talks, but to be part of this big group and really hear what everyone was saying was great. I'd like you to check in on George's website, www.georgepkansas.com.
Right, thanks, Jen.
And George, any other way that you want people to get in touch with you?
Well, the email is gpk@georgepkansas.com, or the other website that goes to the same spot is www.jumpercablesforthesoul.com.
I love that. Jumper Cables for the Soul, and George is the one to bring that to you and give you that message.
Thanks, Janice. Thanks so much for your positive feedback. It's so incredibly rewarding to, well, you know, from your art, you know, you create these beautiful paintings and people come and say, oh, these are fantastic. It's a great feeling to know that some way that special energy that was put inside you, that you put on a canvas, and, you know, for you it was a canvas, for me it was a stage, and in some way that helped somebody. Isn't that a great, it's just an awesome feeling.
George, has been so great having the opportunity to be part of your audience, be part of your coaching. I just get so much out of it.
Thank
It's
you.
sort of like this charge. Well, that's sort of like it really is. It's a supercharge, a spark that I get and our staff here gets every time that you come around, because you always bring some, not only excitement and energy, but also, I think, food for the future. You know, thoughts
cool.
that we have to change our lives and to lead us to better places that we want to be in.
Well, thanks,
You
Janice.
know, I mean, I don't, you know, who really wants to stay in the same place? I mean, I hope that we all want to just grow and continue to be nurtured, and you're one of the people that do that.
Well, thanks. That means a lot coming from you, and I appreciate you saying so. And thanks for facilitating this. I really appreciate it. It was great being on the other side. Your super questions and great dialogue. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So, well, like I said before, I was on the other side of the room today being interviewed by Janice Irwin. I want to thank Janice for doing that today. And please keep in touch. If you want to get in touch with me, you can, or want more information about leadership motivation and our programs, about Jumper Cables for the Soul or the Power of Purpose, please contact me. Send me an email asking for more information at gpk@georgepkansas.com. So take care, take risks, and have fun.